Whisper louder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Whisper Louder. I'm very excited because in this episode, I will be joined with our very first young adult guest, Edward Backer from Long Island, New York. Ed is 22 years old, and I met him through actually an online global youth prayer group on Zoom. And ever since having multiple conversations and discussions with other young people and personal discussions we've had, we have just developed a great and close friendship for about 2.5 years now. Welcome, Ed.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Awesome. So, today's topic, we'll be discussing relationships, connections, and complexities. Now, being a Gen Z, connections and connecting with people can be pretty hard. It can be also complicated. In your opinion, Ed, what is your outlook on connections and relationships today, and how do they relate to being a Gen Z?
Sure. I mean, connecting with people is something that is difficult no matter who you are, in some way, shape, or form. But typically, it's especially in today's world, I would say that it's difficult for Gen Zers to connect with others because of social media. Not to sound cliche, but because of social media. Because with things like Instagram, maybe Snapchat, Be Real, I know is really popular right now among people. Um, it's you develop a kind of pressure on yourself to have an interesting life because you're seeing people on social media posting about, oh, I'm going to Turks and Caicos. Oh, look at me and my friends. We're going on this spontaneous adventure to the middle of nowhere. Or look at me, I'm so pretty, stuff like that. Um, it can create this kind of pressure on yourself to feel like, oh, I have to look like I am interesting. Like people want to be around me. Like my life is, in almost like an idealistic way, worth living. Um, and when you have that kind of like monologue in your own head, just like of that, it's hard to be yourself around people in person or even online because again you want to be seen as interesting, you want to have connections, you want to have relationships with people, but with this, I'm going off on a little tangent, but like with instant gratification coming from technology, coming from social media, if something is not going to pay off immediately, why do we want to spend our time on it? So with how that relates to people is like if this person isn't going to make me laugh all the time, or if I don't really enjoy spending even just quiet time with them, why do I want to be around them? What value do they add to my life? And so people start seeing relationships through that kind of lens of what kind of value does this person add to my life, and that destroys connections, destroys the ability to see people for who they really are.
Mm, yeah. So I feel like social media, not to say social media is bad, but it has impacted our way as being able to connect with other people on a real level, on a
Oh,
genuine
absolutely.
level. Yeah. And I think it does add a pressure, kind of like a little anxiety, peer pressure to measure up and be on the same level as someone else so that you feel you can connect with them. And
Yeah,
then it also becomes like a give or take experience and not really, hey, like I connect with you, I connect with you. We actually bond and we don't even have to go out and do extravagant things. We can just chill and we can have a good time. And I think that point a lot of Gen Zers don't recognize as being very valuable. So we don't have that a lot in these days, especially with social media and a lot of people highlighting everything good that's going on. You never know what
hmm
they might be going through behind the scenes.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, relationships nowadays have really become transactional in their nature,
Yeah.
and it's not healthy. It's not healthy to emotional development or social development.
So, to look at the foundation of connecting with other people, it is a type of relationship. And as Christians, that's one of the biggest ways God instilled in us to relate to people, to have a relationship with them. He wants a relationship with us. And we go to the Bible in Mark 12:28 to 31. It talks about when someone asks God, what was the most important commandment to keep? And in scripture, it said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And so, looking at that verse, God is pretty much telling us to love Him, everything in our soul, our heart, and mind, and to also love people as we love ourselves. So, He instilled two ways that we can connect, connecting with Him and connecting with others.
Hmm.
And that should be the basis of every relationship that we have in our life. God is a relational God, and that relating to others is such an essential to connecting with them and developing a strong bond.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And actually, you bringing up that verse brings up a thought to my mind of loving yourself, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. How do we love ourselves? How do we have a relationship with ourselves? Um, we hear a lot about taking like self care. Maybe you take a day off work or take a day off school. Just time to yourself to rest and relax and yourself the attention that maybe you've been lacking because of other circumstances, like I mentioned, like work or school, other responsibilities, such as so on, and taking that time to love yourself and give yourself the attention that you need. We should be loving others also in a similar way of taking the time to attend to their needs, um, seeing what we can do for them, right? Sacrificing something of ourselves so that we can help to better them. But something that, and this doesn't apply to everyone, of course, but something that does exist is a selfishness that can come along with that self love. Because while there's nothing wrong with self love and taking that time, that's great. We need that every so often. It can be done to an excess. It can be done to an excess, and it can be thought of to an extreme to the point of where you are being selfish with maybe your time or your resources, and not sharing, not being considerate of someone else while you're trying to take that time for yourself. And when you're doing that, when you're being selfish towards yourself, how are you loving others? And not just the question of how you're doing it, but like if we kind of apply it towards loving others, you're being selfish with yourself. Then when it comes to others, you're going to think about, again, like I mentioned earlier, what value do you bring to me? It's going to be transactional.
Yeah, it's going to be selfish coming out.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about them.
Yeah.
And so again, like nothing wrong with self care. I take self care from time to time as well. Um, but it needs to be done in a way that you are not being selfish with your time, with your resources, while you are taking time to attend to yourself, you are doing so while being considerate with others. And so that when you do, when others needs to come to your attention, you can actually take time again, but to attend to their needs in the way that they need it, right? Not thinking about
Mm-hmm.
yourself, but thinking about what they need.
Yeah. And when you were speaking, it honestly, society and social media as a whole has encouraged us, and specifically looking at Gen Z, to be persuaded into this self centered mentality rather than having a healthy balance of taking care of yourself and also looking out for the needs of others, an act of service and intentionality. Whether it's with your friends, whether it's with the person you're in a relationship with, whether it's with
Mhm.
your family. And that is a big hindrance in developing connections with people because it does you have to develop a connection with someone where you're willing to put them first and not yourself.
Yeah.
And that is a foundation that is needed in any type of relationship for it to grow.
Yeah.
If you think about it, Jesus laid down his life for us. That was an
Mhm.
act of service. That was an act of great love and sacrifice. And even though Jesus isn't asking us to, die for someone necessarily, but he is
Right.
asking us to put our selfish desires aside and think about the other person. What would make them happy? What would make them feel valued and seen and loved? I remember reading one somewhere where it said that loneliness is the number one disease in the world. And number two would be fear. Now, obviously, we have physical diseases and, mental diseases. But when it was speaking on loneliness as being the number one disease, it's because the greatest disease that leads to the top two diseases, which is heart disease and stroke, is people feeling unloved, unseen, and uncared for. And over
Mhm.
time, as that progresses in their mind and in their soul and in their body, it causes like that heart condition because they're not feeling loved, they're not feeling seen.
Mhm.
And so the only cure to loneliness and helplessness would be intentional love, which ultimately the best way we can truly practice this and practice intentional love is by our greatest example, Jesus Christ. He truly is the only one who fills that void inside of us and in our hearts. And when we feel complete in Him, we are whole and healthy. And only through Him we can develop and show genuine care and love to others.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings up actually so many thoughts and like areas I could go into. But like two things I guess that like come to mind. I want to just briefly
Mhm,
talk about. Um, you mentioned Jesus and how he was selfless and he took care
mhm,
of other people. Exactly that kind of love that he showed others throughout the Gospels. That kind of love that he showed others, that sacrificial love, is how we should be loving others. That's how we should
mhm,
be treating others, right? We look at uh, Genesis, right?
mm,
What?
mhm,
How did Satan try to attack Adam and Eve and God in a sense as well?
mhm.
He attacked their relationship.
Relationship,
Yeah,
yeah.
he did it through offering them, knowledge that they could be on par with God in terms of
To be
knowledge.
above
But
Him.
he
Mhm.
attacked it by doing so. He attacked their relationship, their connection between
Yeah.
Adam and Eve and God. Um, and then, of course, that brings in so many other issues with connection as well between Adam and Eve, and then their own sons, or like Cain and Abel, for example. From then onwards, connection is maybe not the root, but it is definitely part of the issues that we see throughout the rest of the Bible, throughout the rest of history.
Mhm,
And then the other thing I just want to mention is talking about connection and how difficult it is or can be for not just Gen Zers, but also everyone.
mhm.
I would say everyone in America, especially.
Yeah. Mhm,
We compare American society to societies elsewhere in the world. Um,
mhm,
Look at societies in Africa, in India,
mhm,
in Europe. Historically speaking, anyway,
mhm.
America has become an individualistic society, right? We focus
Yeah.
on ourselves,
Mm,
on
mhm,
our own goals, um, no matter what anyone else thinks, right?
mhm.
Whereas other cultures have collective, collectivistic societies.
Mhm,
Not sure if that's how it's pronounced. Um, where you're focused on families, you're focused on
mhm.
community, right? Building each
Yeah.
other up. Now, there's a lot of issues that still exist within those kinds of societies as well, but
Mhm,
they're at their core, at their root. we have a focus on self versus a focus on community, on all of us, collection of people. And I mean, you look um, at families, for example, immigrants. Okay, my father, he immigrated from Haiti with the rest of his family, and while we're all spread out across the U.S., mostly the East Coast, there's always big events that bring the whole family together, and there's so many family members. My dad's always talking about, oh, did you hear about your cousin this, and oh, did you hear about your second aunt who did this, and yada yada yada. I was like, I'm sorry, Dad, I really don't know all these people. I try, but everyone's
Mhm.
related. He points me in the direction. Hey, cousin, all right. Um, but like my dad's family when they first immigrated to the U.S. He's one of six children, right? And then there's cousins and everything, and they all work together to help each other survive and get to the places where they are now. Um, Whereas myself, for example, I'm Gen Z. I'm 22. I'm trying to find my way in this world. While I do have connections with others, I have my family as well. I I'm an only child. I don't really feel like I have all those same connections that my dad did, or that all the same support rather to get to where I am. Like I feel like I'm trying to find my path in this world alone and just try to make everyone happy. You know, it's harder to do things on your own than it is as a group, right? Because when one person is feeling down, you have other people to support them. But when you're on your own, who do you have to support you?
Yeah. Wow. That is so true. And just it shows us how much community is important. Even in the Bible it says that it's better to have two or three together than just one. And you feel the Holy Spirit even more when you're with other people and you're connecting and you're engaging and having a good time. Definitely the United States, I would say, has become the most like self-centered, whereas you look at other countries and they still have the original foundations of family and community and involvement, just just a heart of service.
Mhm.
Whereas here it's kind of like you gotta move up the ladder. You gotta be at this point to gain the respect that you need,
Yeah, yeah,
and you feel like not accepted. Knowing who you are literally sets the tone of how you connect with other people. Because you don't if you don't know who you are, you're kind of pretty much just be copying everything that you see just to,
mhm,
be relatable to someone.
mhm.
But if you know who you are, that attracts the right people to connect
Amen,
with. And we're God's children. We know who our identities in Him. I want to do ministry. I want to reach young people.
mhm,
That's what I want to do with my life. And I'm confident in that because that's what God called me to do. And
mhm.
so if you know what God's called you to do, and you know what He said of you, that you are His chosen generation, that you are beautifully and wonderfully made, nothing else that anyone says about you is valid because God already called you. He told you who you were. And that's the only validation that we need.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, so many things just pop in my mind. Um, I'll say there's two things, and I'll hand it back to you for a sec. But like, um, one thing. So going back to like campus and exactly that, like identity, like knowing who you are, and like you made a fantastic point. That like when you know who you are and act on that, like you'll find the people who will appreciate you for who you are.
Yeah, the right people.
Exactly the right people. Like I know I mentioned like trying to find my own way here in life and just like kind of feeling alone at times. At the same time, I also mentioned that I do have like friends. I do have support. I do have I well I don't have like one specific condensed like cohesive group. I suppose there are people scattered about here and there. coming into this school, like I mentioned, like I never went to academy. This is my first Adventist school, and I transferred in from another university. It was a secular university where I was the only Adventist I knew who was my age anyway for 2 years. And it was very lonesome, very lonesome. Now there were things that got me through, but eventually I transferred to here at Southern, coming in and seeing people again having issues with connecting, maybe trying to be someone that they're not, still focused on like popularity. Like that's such a high school thing, guys. We're in college. Come on. Um, Something I realized, that mentality that I developed, um, I would say rather quickly. It took me maybe like a year or so, but mentality I developed was I'm just speaking for myself, express myself in the way that I do, and not care what anyone else thinks. So, a lot of people know me here on campus. I'm someone who's joyful, someone who's always excited to talk to you or to hang out with you, or just like someone who, enjoys that connection. And I'll express it. I'll express it loudly. I'll express it boldly, right? Um, and just not really care what anyone else thinks. But doing so, in being able to do all that and have that mentality, I've been able to make so many amazing friendships and meet so many amazing people. And I'm so thankful to God for that, and how He helped me with that kind of thinking. But I see people around me who struggle with that. I'm just like, and I feel bad for them because, you know, while that may not be the only thing in their way, if mentality is a huge part of it. If you are okay with who you are and comfortable with expressing yourself, no matter what anyone else thinks, the ability and the ease at which you will build true, lasting connections, it will come. Everything will just fall into place. Everything will just fall into place. And so that's just, I guess, something I want to say. Just like, thankful to God for that. But also point out just like mentality is another part of it. The other thing, thinking about knowing who you are, comes to mind is Daniel, the book of Daniel, but Daniel and his three friends, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Um, as I believe those were their Babylonian names. But like we see the beginning of, I believe it's the beginning of Daniel, where they are taken to Nebuchadnezzar's palace, and they are among the other Hebrew captives, and they're being forced or very highly encouraged, very strongly encouraged, to eat unclean meats, to drink in the wine, drink particularly of the king's wine, live in a lifestyle that is foreign to them, that they were raised to not partake in. And while names aren't mentioned of the other Hebrew captives, we know that there exist other captives, and how they succumb to that pressure, to conform, to lose their identity, right? But we have Daniel and his three friends. They didn't. They stayed true to who they are. Why? Because of the exact point that you brought up, that they knew who they were in God, right? In Yeshua. They knew who they were. They knew that they were his children, that they were part of a chosen people, and that God had guidelines of just like how he would expect his children to live in a way that would be pleasing to him. And they follow them. They stay true to them because they identified with them. And in doing so, where do we see they end up? Daniel, he ends up in high places, right? An advisor to the king, beating out people who had been holding that position for years, presumably. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Oh my goodness, right? The golden statue that Nebuchadnezzar was explicitly told not to build. Everyone else was bowing down, right? How else can we see you bowing down? Submitting, right? submitting to someone else's will, to someone else's view of themselves, to someone else's
Going
identity.
along.
Exactly. But what did they do? They didn't submit. They didn't succumb to that pressure. They stayed true, again, to themselves, to their identity. And they were tried literally by fire. Literally by fire. Devil doesn't play. But what do we see in the midst of that trial by fire? God was with them. And Nebuchadnezzar saw that. And they were rewarded afterwards, right? Because they stayed true to themselves, expressing themselves, who they really are in God. In doing so, they built connection. They strengthened their own connection with each other. They strengthened their connection with God. They strengthened their connection with Nebuchadnezzar. And as we know later on, Nebuchadnezzar, just like us, we're human. We make mistakes. We get close to God. We get far from God. We get close to God. We make mistakes. But it was through the actions of Daniel and his three friends that their strength of relationship with God and with Nebuchadnezzar helped Nebuchadnezzar grow closer to God. So what happens when we know our identity in God and we're firm with that and we express that no matter what the circumstances, no matter
Become
what
an
the pressure?
example to others.
Exactly. And we bring them closer to God. There are a lot of people out there who haven't ever read the Bible, who don't have a connection with Jesus, God. We are the Bible that they read at the first glance. So we have to know who we are in God and have a strong connection with Him so that we can build a strong connection with them and bring them closer to God. 1, 2, 3. What does that build? A triangle. We're building a triangle as well. Ourself, God, and them.
Wow. Did you guys enjoy that? So many amazing points shared. And I'm sure you guys definitely want to hear more. As a matter of fact, you're in luck. We will be continuing this conversation in a part 2 of Connections and Complexities coming next week. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share with your friends. This is your host, Alyssa Smith, and I look forward to sharing with you all next time. Always remember to whisper louder.